Hello, my friends, and welcome to the cottage gardens at the Elliott Homestead. I really have no agenda for this video or for today other than to show you around the gardens, share with you a few of my favorite things. These are the gardens that we've been building up around our little cottage for the last 6 years. Some of them are even younger than that. Some of them are 2, 3, 4 years old. Because to grow gardens this size really means this commitment to gardening long term. I've said this before on the channel, but Monty Don always says that your gardens will start to look like themselves at about 12 years. So we're only halfway there, and I have to say, I'm really proud of what we've built so far. It's really easy to look at all these beautiful flowers and enjoy them and not see the sweat equity that's gone into building them. And I think part of their enjoyment, at least for me, comes from knowing exactly how much work has gone into them. But there's so much beauty here to be had. There's so much to celebrate. Each week, you get 3 weeks of these royal wedding poppies blooming. You get 3 weeks where all the roses are in flush all at the same time. You get 3 weeks of lupins. They're all these short little windows that sort of dapple through the spring and summer season. So you have to just take in as much beauty as you can possibly bear while you can. I'm gonna actually harvest a few flowers today for a still life photograph that we'll be taking in the studio. I also have some chive flowers to harvest and some cilantro to harvest and freeze dry. So you'll notice as we walk through the gardens that there's flowers dappled with shrubs, dappled with roses, dappled with herbs and strawberries. It's all kind of mixed together, and that's part of what makes these gardenings so exciting for me. So we have fruit trees next to the roses and chives next to the strawberries, and that's where the beauty and the magic really happen. So let's just walk through, savor it together, and enjoy some beauty. So I have a few new favorite flowers this year. Sometimes it takes them a couple years to sort of come into their own. And one of them is this rambling rose from David Austin. I'll look up the name and tag it in the show notes below. This is really its first year actually blooming. This is one of the flowers I'll be taking a still life of. Look at these. There's not much happier than a yellow flower, other than a yellow flower that's also a rose. They're beautiful. One question we get asked a lot is how long it takes us every week to maintain these gardens. I think we've kind of got it down to a good amount. It doesn't feel like it's too much, but we get plenty of time for enjoyment as well. Typically, we come out in the morning first thing. Here in Washington, we get a lot of light in the summertime, which means that when we're up at 5, the sun is already up. So that means we can come outside and put in an hour to an hour and a half every morning before even the kids are up, before it's time for breakfast. And that's usually enough to maintain all of the gardens, including the big market garden. So it might sound like a lot, but after the years of sort of building these gardens, that's a really reasonable amount for us. And there's honestly no other way that I would rather spend my morning. Now, when we have a big garden project, maybe when we're putting in a new bed or working on, some hardscaping with rock, that tends to be a little bit more of a Saturday project. And we'll devote pretty much all day on Saturday to building that out. We're just about ready to do that with a new little piece of the courtyard, but we're not quite there yet. But in terms of just maintaining the garden, about an hour a day of just weeding. And I do that by kind of taking 2 tubs with me into a certain space. I've broken it up in my mind. I have 1 tub for weeds and compostable material. Then I have another tub for toys and trash and children's socks and all the other sort of remnants that you naturally need to pick up through a garden space when people live in it. So this is some really beautiful bee balm. When bee balm is beautiful, it's so beautiful. And when it goes bad, it goes pretty bad. You have to cut it back. These flowers, they don't really have a strong flavor, but they're beautiful. So I'm actually gonna throw a tray of these into the freeze dryer, and that way I can just use them as like a sprinkling little medley over things in the wintertime, because they're cheerful and they're colorful. When you freeze dry things, it really preserves the color of them as well. And you can see these are a really beautiful blue. So I'll just break each of these little flower buds off and dry them just like that, just for something a little special. You'll notice in our cottage gardens, doing this little tour, that we have a lot of repeat flowers. We actually keep very few species in the garden. Part of that is because I want to be able to care for them well, and it takes a lifetime of gardening to know each flower and its specifics and what it likes and how to care for it best. Cottage gardens are also a bit scruffy, and so I let things self-seed so that it looks naturalized. And when you do that, you get snow and summer popping up on the other side of the pathway, and you get little baby foxgloves all over the place and irises that spread. So things tend to repeat themselves really easily that way, and it kind of gives it that lived-in, natural look. So if I were to give you 12 cottage garden flowers to start with, flowers that sort of repeat in every garden that we have, I'm gonna do this off the top of my head. I would say old roses, I buy David Austin's, snow and summer, any variation of poppy, lamb's ear, hardy geranium, snapdragons, zinnias, echinacea, nigella, lilacs, of course that's a bush, lupin. Did I say foxglove? That's 12. Cosmos, hollyhocks, fireweed. Shall we go on? Probably not. Spotted dead nettle is a really beautiful ground cover. Sunflowers, of course. But really it doesn't, I know it can look a little bit overwhelming, especially if you're just starting your garden. Just start with 12. Start with 12 flowers that you love, plant them, repeat them everywhere, and then you can always pepper in new species as you find other flowers that you enjoy. Let's go to the courtyard. Here's what I'm after today specifically, because chive flowers are really only good for a pretty short period of time. If you cut your chives back completely, they'll regrow and you can get a second harvest of chive flowers. But the great thing about them is they taste just very faintly of chive, of onion. So they're really beautiful and delicious to sprinkle over salads and eggs and roasts and potatoes, pretty much anything that you would pair with an onion. So I'm going to freeze dry these. You can also just dehydrate them, although freeze drying tends to keep the color a little bit stronger. So I'm just gonna pop all of these off. They look like little Dr. Seuss flowers. And it's gonna be sad to see the loss of color in the garden, but one of the things about gardening is you have to accept that things will die back and you're gonna harvest them and they will grow again. There's plenty of other foods for the bees to eat out here right now, so I'm not too worried about that, but they've been enjoyed for sure. So behind the chive blossoms right here is this gigantic currant bush. This bush is about 4 years old now, and it's massive, completely loaded down with these little tart currant berries. So we grow a variety of different currants in our garden. This is a pink currant bush. They tend to be very tart, and we use them almost like you would a juice. So we press them and we sort of extract the pulp and get the juices flowing, and then we mix in some honey and some gin, and we use it as a cordial that we can enjoy really all year round. We also planted some black currant bushes down in the greenhouse gardens just last year. So we have a teeny little harvest of currants on there this year. But they're a really sweet little bush. Even if you don't eat them, the birds absolutely love them. And I think they're really beautiful. It's like little clusters of perfect little pink berries dangling down. And when they ripen, they smell so good. So I'm standing next to our apricot tree, which is 5 years old now, and it's given us an amazing crop of apricots for the last couple of years. Unfortunately, we had a really hard frost on Good Friday this year, and it was right when this was in bloom. So the orchardists around us lost 90% of their cherry crop, and we lost, I think, all but maybe 10 apricots on this whole tree just from that one frost. It kind of just goes to show you there are years of plenty and there are years of mistakes and there are years of growth and hard work and years to reap the harvest and years to just sit back and say, we'll get them next year. So I hope you've enjoyed our little garden tour this year in all its beauty and in all its imperfections. And I hope it inspires you to go and start a garden of your own, because there is so much pleasure to be had in the world of gardens.